Imagine you're running a tech company and you're preparing for a new product launch. Your senior team needs to communicate in real time to provide closely held information that you wouldn't want getting out into the public before launch. But your internal systems, they're too slow, they're too clunky, or simply inaccessible in the moment. So what do? How do you make sure that everyone on your team is still in the loop, even if you're scattered across the globe? Maybe you open Signal, start a group chat. It's immediate, it's encrypted, so your problem solves, right? That's exactly what happened inside the U.S. national security community. Top officials, including the vice president and members of the intelligence and defense establishment, used Signal to coordinate during an operational situation. Some say it was necessary. Others say it may have involved sensitive or operationally significant details that may have crossed the line. But now the debate's underway. Classified this, security clearance that. We all use these phrases, but do we actually know what they mean? Who can classify something? Who decides who gets what access? And what does top secret really mean? Today on Midweek Sitrep, we take a deep dive into the world of intelligence and explore how America guards its secrets. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Midweek Sitrep, your weekly briefing on national security law and policy. My name is Jerry Fowler, and I'm your host. Each week I break down what you need to know and what you might have missed in the world of national security and business, all in under 20 minutes, so you can stay mission focused. Before we do a deep dive into the world of intelligence, let's break down what we should be monitoring in national security this week. Kremlin officials say peace talks with Ukraine are dragging on, but behind the scenes, Putin just ordered 160,000 new conscripts. At the same time, reports suggest Russia's moving 300,000 troops toward NATO borders, raising alarms across the Baltics. President Trump is threatening 25% to 50% tariffs on countries that continue buying Russian oil. This could hit China and India hard and reshape global energy markets. The U.S. just sanctioned 6 senior Chinese and Hong Kong officials for cracking down on pro-democracy activists. Beijing's already threatening retaliation as tensions between Washington and China heat up once again. A Chinese survey ship spotted near Australia's undersea internet cables has sparked national security fears. Critics say that the government's downplaying it, but defense experts warn that this could be prep work for future submarine operations. Stay ahead by monitoring how these stories evolve. Now, let's get to the world of intelligence. So what does classified actually mean? Classified isn't just jargon. It's a legal status tied to national security. There are 3 primary levels of classification. There's confidential, secret, and top secret. Now, what distinguishes them is the level of damage to national security that unauthorized disclosure would cause. For confidential, it's damage. For secret, it's serious damage. And for top secret, it's exceptionally grave damage. So you can see as you go up from confidential to top secret, the level of damage increases. But that's not all. Some information is even more restricted than the confidential, secret, top secret markings. The 2 most common, sensitive compartmented information, or SCI. And there's also special access programs, or SAP. Now these require extra vetting and special access beyond the regular clearance level. And just because someone has a clearance doesn't mean they get access. They also need a need to know. So here's the big question. Who gets to decide what's a secret? Is it a small group? Some inner circle in a windowless room? No. In the US government, the power to classify information is held by a group of trained officials called Original Classification Authorities, OCAs for short. They're not random. They're appointed by the heads of federal agencies, like the CIA, the Department of Defense, or the State Department, and they go through mandatory training every year. Most OCAs work inside the national security machine, where they classify information. The Department of Defense, the intelligence community, like the CIA, NSA, DIA, and critical departments like State, Energy, and Justice. Agency heads like the CIA Director, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, those are usually the department's primary OCAs. They hold top secret authority, and they can delegate it down the chain to trusted senior officials. But delegation doesn't mean a free-for-all. Every classification decision must be justified under national security rules, follow applicable executive orders, and be reviewable and traceable. Because once something's classified, it's locked behind legal walls, access restrictions, and audit logs. In other words, being an OCA means more than just holding a stamp. It means owning the consequences of keeping America's secrets. But does it stop there? No. Let's talk about who's at the top of the classification food chain. Who's the only person in America who can classify and declassify anything at any time for any reason? The answer? It's the President of the United States. And that power isn't granted by statute, executive memo. No, it flows straight from the U.S. Constitution. The President is the ultimate original classification authority. And that means the President can declassify something with a memo, or just by saying it out loud. The President doesn't need to consult with an agency, and they don't need to document it. Although for practical reasons, they should, and they usually do. In 2025, President Trump is flexing that power. He's already declassified files related to MLK Jr., JFK, and RFK's assassinations, ordered reviews on Cold War-era covert actions, and most recently on March 25th, he declassified the full Crossfire Hurricane file. Now that's the FBI's Trump-Russia probe. To supporters, it's transparency. To critics, it's reckless. To lawyers, it's lawful. Because love it or hate it, when the president holds the pen, what's secret today could be public tomorrow. So now that the information's been classified, how do people actually get access to that classified information? Not through status, not through seniority, not even through rank. They get it by going through the security clearance process. And it's no joke. Here's how it works. First, you fill out a massive form called the SF-86. You'll report on your finances, relationships, criminal history, your education. It's a full-on background check. Second, you're going to get investigated by the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. They'll call your friends. They'll check your finances. Hey, they may even visit your high school prom date. It's, again, a full-on background check. And if you're going for SCI access, you may even have to take a polygraph. And after you make it through it all, you sign a non-disclosure agreement, binding you for life. Only after all of that do you get a clearance. But even then, you still can't access everything. You need two things. The right clearance level, remember, confidential, secret, or top secret, and a need to know. That is, a legitimate reason to access the specific information. No clearance gives you blanket access to all the secrets. Even the vice president has to be read into certain compartments. Clearances don't unlock the whole vault. They'll just get you through the front door. And that brings us to the point. How classified information should be stored and shared. Now let's be clear. Classified information isn't just about what you know. It's about how you store it, how you send it, and who you share it with. By policy and law, classified material must only be stored, processed, and transmitted on government-authorized secure systems. Not on personal emails, not commercial cloud storage, and definitely not messaging apps like Signal or WhatsApp, no matter how encrypted they may be. Top secret information? Well, that lives in air-gapped systems, stored in secure facilities, and sometimes even in standalone vaults inside SCIFs, sensitive compartmented information facilities. And when it's shared through classified email networks, encrypted voice and video systems built for national security use, and only between people with the right clearance, the need to know, and compartment access. The bottom line, encrypted doesn't equal compliant. If it's not on a government-authorized system, it's not secure enough to handle national secrets. So you've passed your background check. You've signed an NDA. You now hold a security clearance, and with it, the trust of the US government. But here's the thing, that trust comes with consequences. Now, everyone with the clearance signs that non-disclosure agreement that binds you for life. It says that you acknowledge what classified information is. You agree to never share it without authorization. And if you do, you may be prosecuted under the Espionage Act. Now, this isn't just paperwork. It's law. And it's enforced. Edward Snowden learned that the hard way. He was a contractor at the NSA. He had a top secret SCI clearance. And in 2013, he downloaded and leaked thousands of classified files exposing secret surveillance programs. He didn't file a complaint. He didn't alert internal watchdogs. He didn't avail himself of legal options. Instead, he broke the law. He violated his NDA, and he went directly to journalists with classified information. Then, he boarded a plane out of the country. And what was the impact? Well, it started a global debate about privacy and surveillance, a public backlash against the intelligence community, and a national security incident that shook the system. Now, Snowden says he did it for freedom. The US government says he broke the law and put lives at risk. And whatever side that you're on, one thing is clear. The greatest threats to national security don't always come from the outside. Sometimes they come from within. Okay, now that you have a background in what classifications mean, who classifies what information, and how people access that information, let's break down the Signal chat controversy. As you know, early 2025, several top US officials, including Vice President J.D. Vance, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, used the encrypted app Signal to share real-time information during US military operations in Yemen. Now, reports say that the chat included targeting details, operational timelines, sensitive military coordination. What made the headlines wasn't just the medium, it was the mistake. The Atlantic's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, was inadvertently added to the group chat. So critics say this is a violation of protocol. It exposed sensitive information, and it never should have happened. Some legal experts and national security commentators have pointed to potential violations of federal law and executive orders, including the Espionage Act for mishandling national defense information, Executive Order 13526 that governs classification and handling of national security information, whereas Signal is not a recognized system for classified communications, and the Federal Records Act and Presidential Records Act. They could be relevant if Signal messages qualify as official communications that must be preserved. Now, it's important to note that none of these charges have been brought, but the legal framework helps explain why the Signal chat raised alarm bells inside and outside the government. So how did the Trump administration respond? Well, President Trump called the incident the only glitch in 2 months, end quote. His broader message? Mistakes happen, but no classified material was leaked. CIA Director John Ratcliffe and DNI Tulsi Gabbard both told Congress that no classified information was shared. Signal was used only for coordination, not to transmit secrets. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth went further, telling reporters nobody was texting war plans. The media's reporting is garbage. And Press Secretary Leavitt said that the matter was closed and they're moving on. The administration's framing is clear. Signal is encrypted. The chat was informal. No laws or protocols were broken, and the media overreacted. They've also argued that CIA devices under the Biden administration were issued with Signal, and that officials are trained on how to use it in ways that comply with the agency's policy. Now, if this story feels familiar, it's because it is. Secure communication failures aren't new, and they're not partisan. In 2016, Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server during her time as Secretary of State led to an FBI investigation. In 2022, classified documents were found at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate, sparking DOJ scrutiny. In 2023, Joe Biden had Obama-era documents discovered in his Delaware garage and private office. Even Mike Pence later revealed that he had inadvertently taken classified materials home. Each case triggered legal reviews, political finger-pointing, and public confusion. And now, Signal joins that list. So what lessons can we learn from the Signal story? What happened isn't just a national security issue. It could be a compliance story, a governance story, and honestly, a very human story. So what can we take away? Well, there's 3 things businesses can do right now to improve their communications policies. And the first is to review your communications policy and do it seriously. Encrypted tools like Signal, WhatsApp, and Slack are fast, convenient, and everywhere. But ask yourself, are they authorized for sensitive communications in your organization? Are there clear boundaries? And if your policy hasn't been updated since 2020, it's already outdated. You should also implement role-based messaging controls. Establish who's allowed in what chat, who can create channels. Do you have audit logs and alerts if someone adds the wrong recipient? This isn't just about compliance, it's about situational control. Lastly, you should also train for the oops factor. Every organization should have simulated wrong recipient drills. What happens when a C-suite accidentally includes a journalist on a sensitive email? That's not hypothetical anymore. It's probably now called the Signal incident. Now, for the everyday listener, there's also 3 things you can do. The first is slow down before you hit send. Check the recipient. Now check it again. Whether it's an email, a group chat, or a calendar invite, accuracy matters more than speed. Also, don't assume encryption means it's authorized. Just because an app is secure doesn't mean it's approved. Your company, agency, or client may have restrictions, even on tools that advertise privacy. Also, speak up if you see gaps. If you're in a role where communications gets messy or unclear, raise your hand. Most breaches start with silence, not sabotage. And in the end, the app doesn't make the decision. People do. And in high-stakes environments, discipline, not convenience, is what's keeping secrets safe. Well, that's it for today's Midweek Sitrep. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share, and stay engaged. And while you're at it, stop by our store and pick up some merch. Link in the description and our social media accounts. I'm Jerry Fowler, and remember, everything is national security. See you next time. The information provided in this podcast is for general information purposes only and does not constitute legal, financial, or professional advice. Listeners should consult with a qualified professional before making any decision based on the content discussed. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and the guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any government agency, the U.S. military, or any employer, organization, or entity with which we are affiliated. Mention of a company, product, or service in this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation. Any references are for information purposes only. This podcast does not disclose any classified, proprietary, or confidential information. Discussions are based on publicly available information and personal expertise.